Hey, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This is Chris Shoemaker, also known as Yehuda Ben Shomer, and welcome to the Weekly Way, your weekly devotional commentary on the Torah, Half-Torah, and Brit Chadasha portion. Today we are in Parashah, or Torah portion number 4, which is Vayira, meaning "and he appeared," and it's taken from Genesis chapter 18, verse 1, all the way to chapter 22, verse 24. And so today we're going to focus on Avraham Avinu, Father Abraham, and one of his best-known characteristics, one of his best-known character traits throughout Judaism, Christianity, and in Islam, and that is the trait of hospitality. Father Abraham, Avraham Avinu, was known for being a very hospitable man, that he would treat kin and stranger alike, small and great alike, that he would be very hospitable to him when they ever showed up at his home, his tent, or his compound. And so let's get right on into it. Genesis 18:1 says, "And the Lord," capital L-O-R-D in the King James, which meaning that the scripture is using the tetragrammaton, the proper name of God. In Hebrew, it would be the letters Yud-He, Vav-He. "And the Lord appeared unto him," Abraham, "in the plains of Mamre." So God himself took on a physical form, a physical manifestation of a man, and appeared unto Abraham in the plains of Mamre as Abraham, as he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. So what's significant about this verse? Well, first of all, the Lord appears in a physical form, in the form of a man. He takes on a physical manifestation. Second of all, we find Abraham sitting at the tent of his door in the heat of the day, which tells us several things. In the desert Bedouin community, the heat of the day was a time of the day where you relaxed, where you rested, where you refreshed yourself, where you stayed out of the heat and didn't do any work, where you stayed in the shade, because it was futile to do anything at the hottest part of the day. The sun sapped your strength and energy. You were in danger of having heat stroke or heat exhaustion or getting sick. You weren't very productive. You weren't able to get a lot of stuff done. So it was just kind of pointless. So the Bedouin community, the desert community, rested during the heat of the day, which was high noon and when the sun was at its peak and at its hottest. And so that was one significant thing. Second of all, if you read the chapter before, you'll remember that God commanded Abraham to circumcise himself, and he was close to 100 years old at this time, circumcise himself, circumcise his son Ishmael, which was 13, and circumcise all the men of his household. All the men, whether they were workers, soldiers, slaves, servants, hired hands, whatever, they were circumcised. So this was 3 days after the circumcision, which according to tradition and according to medical knowledge, common medical knowledge, that the 3rd day after the circumcision is the most painful day of the whole ordeal. During the healing process, the 3rd day is the most painful. So he was sitting at the tent door in the heat of the day, and he was just trying to stay cool. He was trying to get comfortable because, you know, the circumcision was very painful and very raw. So he was just trying to get some comfort. And according to tradition and extra-biblical literature and rabbinical literature, that it was a habit of Abraham to open up the 4 corners of his tent so he could see all across the horizon, north, south, east, and west. He was always on the lookout for travelers and strangers on the horizon so he could invite them in, so he could be hospitable to him and practice hospitality unto these people. Because you were seeing anybody traveling in the desert, especially in the heat of the day, it probably meant that they were in trouble. It probably meant that they didn't have any water, didn't have any food, they didn't have any shade, they didn't have any place to go, and it was basically a death sentence. So anytime you saw somebody wandering in the desert, it was desert culture to be hospitable, invite them in, and to refresh them with water and with food and with shade, and to let them rest until things cooled down and they could travel again when it was cooler in the evening. And so this was Abraham's habit. So, you know, if you saw somebody traveling out there in the heat of the day, it was basically a death sentence. And you were able to give life and save that person's life by bringing them in. So that was another reason why he was at his tent door in the heat of the day. Also, Abraham was a very different kind of guy. He was a different cat during his day because he was considered a monotheist, meaning that he only believed in the one true God. See, during this time, people believed in a pantheon of gods. For every natural phenomena, whether it was volcanoes or earthquakes or hurricanes or tornadoes or dust storms, whether it was rain, whether it was sun, whether it was clouds, whether it was weather, whether it was crops, whether it was mountains, whether it was animals, whether it was plants, whatever phenomena there was in nature, there was a God for it. There was a God who ruled over it. There was a God behind it. Abraham said, this doesn't make any sense. He said, there isn't a pantheon of gods that keep this universe running. There's only one God who's created it and oversees it all and controls it all. And so he was also not only being hospitable to people when he brought strangers in, when he saw them traveling in the heat of the day on the horizon, he was also a type of missionary, a type of evangelist, because that was his opportunity to refresh them with food and water and shade and rest. But he was also able to tell them about Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, about the Lord, about the one true God who created everything, and was able to be a missionary of sorts. Genesis 13:18 says, and Abram removed his tent, and he came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is Hebron, and Hebron, if you remember, that is a future place where David will set up his rule in his kingdom. And he built there an altar unto the Lord. So he was a worshiper of the one true God. So these things has set us up very good for all these things that are about to take place. So according to the Talmud, in Bava Metzia 86b, it says, God came to visit Abraham 3 days after his circumcision, which is the most painful day of healing from the procedure, and the passage makes it clear that Abraham didn't make his pain an excuse not to entertain his guests. So Genesis 18:2 says, and he, Abraham, lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself towards the ground. So as he was kind of scanning the horizon, looking for travelers on the horizon, north, south, east, and west, maybe he got distracted and kind of looked down or kind of closed his eyes and rested a little bit. But it says, and he lifted up his eyes, and lo, basically, wow, boom, poof, out of nowhere, there was 3 men that stood by him. He didn't see them on the horizon, and they slowly came up to him. All of a sudden, they appeared. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them. Did you get that? Understand that. This is 3 days after the circumcision, the most painful day of the healing process of the circumcision. And it says he ran to meet them. You know, just as the Talmud said, he didn't make an excuse of the painful circumcision as an excuse not to be hospitable. It didn't say he slowly got up. He painfully got up. And he was wincing, and he was cradling himself to try to keep himself from the pain, and he hobbled to these 3 people that suddenly appeared before him. No. It says he ran to meet them. He didn't make any excuse not to be hospitable. He didn't let the pain of the circumcision show. He didn't say, sorry guys, I know that I have a reputation of being hospitable and treating people traveling in the desert, but I just can't today. I'm in so much pain. I'm just trying to stay comfortable and cool. You know, I think there's somebody, you know, a couple miles down the road that's got a tent set up. They'll be able to be hospitable to you and treat you. No, it says he ran to meet them from the tent door, bowed himself towards the ground. Verse 3, and he said, my Lord, capital L-O-R-D, using God's proper name, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He knew that this person, this man, this leader of the 3, was a physical manifestation of the God of this universe, of the creator God, of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. He said, my Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray, from thy servant. So he obviously recognized that at least 1 out of the 3 was a physical manifestation of God himself. And it was a privilege and an honor to serve God, this physical manifestation of God. The other 2 was he probably recognized as God's messengers, God's malachim, God's angels that he had with him. So you know, he gave them food, he gave them shade, he gave them respite, and he fellowshiped with God and the angels there. So this is the Torah portion for this week, and the half Torah portion is 2 Kings chapter 4 verses 1 through 37. So in our Haftorah portion, we read of the hospitality of the Shulamite woman to the prophet Elijah. Elijah had this circuit that he would travel on a regular basis, and so every so often he would pass by this Shulamite woman's house. So this Shulamite woman and her husband thought, he passes through here often. We always provide him a place to stay. Since he comes on a regular basis, why don't we build a special room for him on the roof that could just be his room, his little dwelling place, and he can stay with us whenever he comes through. And we'll just provide a bed and a chair and a desk or whatever for him. So this is what happened. So as a reward, the prophet prophesied to the Shulamite woman that she would have a son. And eventually she did have a son. And when the child got older, he was out in the field with his father, and all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, my head, my head." Some people think it was heat stroke. Some people think it might have been a brain aneurysm. Whatever it was, the servant rushed the child back to his mother, and the child ended up dying in the mother's arms. So the prophet comes by, and the child is dead. The child is laid up in this prophet's room, dead as a doornail, cold as a corpse, on the bed. And so when Elisha finds this out, he goes up to his room where the child is, and he lays on top of the child, hand to hand, foot to foot, eye to eye, nose to nose, mouth to mouth, and he prays, and the child is resurrected from the dead, and he gives the child back to his mother. This also reminds us of the Torah portion, because in the Torah portion we see the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac. So Isaac was as good as dead, because God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac as a burnt offering. Not only was Abraham going to slit Isaac's throat, but he was going to burn Isaac and reduce him to ash. And nonetheless, Abraham believed that God was going to and had the ability and the power to raise Isaac, resurrect him from ash. And so we know that instead of the sacrifice taking place, because of Abraham's willingness and faithfulness to carry this out to the letter, God provides a ram as a substitute to sacrifice in place of Isaac. So just as Isaac was given back to Abraham alive, because he was certainly as sure as dead if he would have went through this sacrifice, so too we see that the Shulamite woman receives her son back from the dead. So we see that the Torah portion and the Haftorah portion connect in such a great way. Now on to the Brit Chadasha portion. It says in Matthew 7:12, these are the words of Yeshua our Messiah. It says, "Do to others as you would have them do to you." It's known as the golden rule, right? So if we obviously want people to be hospitable to us and to love us and to care for us and to help us when they see that we're in need. So we are to do the same thing to other people, because that's what we would want done to us. So that's hospitality. 2 Corinthians 13:12 says, "Greet one another with a holy kiss." That was a very customary thing. Today we shake hands here in the Western world. Back then they kissed each other on the cheek to greet each other. That was a sign of goodwill and hospitality and love. So in Hebrews 13:2 it says, "Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware." And this makes us think of the Torah portion where Abraham entertained God in physical form, as well as 2 angels that traveled with him. So it says, "Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware." Strangers, not only people you don't know, but people that are not of your faith, people that are not of your ethnicity, people that are not a part of you. They're strangers. They're goyim. They're of the nations. It says, "Be not forgetful to entertain strangers." Not just people you know, not just your neighbors, not just other Christians or other Jews, but entertain people that are not like you at all, just because they're human beings and because we're supposed to love everybody. "For by some have entertained angels unaware." And we've heard stories and legends of angels disguising themselves, or even the prophet Elijah disguising himself as a stranger, or as a hobo, or as a bum, or as somebody that's undesirable, just to test to see if somebody would entertain him, and therefore they would get rewarded. So the Brit Chadasha really emphasizes as well the portions that we read, to be hospitable to people, to love other people, and to show them hospitality as we would want them to do for us. Anyway, this is the Torah, Haftorah, and Brit Chadasha portion for this week. Thanks so much for joining me and for watching. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov. Have a great week, folks. Bye. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to press the like button, as well as the subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and the notification bell that'll let you know every time I make a new video. And don't forget to share this with a friend. Also, visit our website at abrahamsdescendants.com. Thanks. Shalom.